Welcome, everyone, to the Food and Movies podcast, where we investigate the intersection between food and movies. I'm your host, Paul. This is my friend, Jeremy. And what is the movie we have today, Jer?
I'm excited, Paul. We are doing one of my favorite films, Master and Commander, The Far Side of the World, directed by Peter Weir. And in my opinion, one of the most kind of interesting, historically accurate films of all time. Love this movie.
Absolutely.
Love everything about it. Read the books, big fan of the books, the Patrick O'Brian books, the Aubrey Maturin series. Fantastic. What are your thoughts on this movie?
Well, I loved the movie when it came out, and I never read the books, so I'm so glad that you read the books, because I can't wait to talk to you about that, by the way. But as I was watching the movie again, what struck me about it is I think that in Hollywood right now, we're in a phase of Hollywood where the majority of filmmakers, I would categorize them as immature filmmakers. I think there's a level of immaturity in Hollywood right now, filmmaking in general, where everything seems to be a race to be the wittiest or the most ironic or the most meta. And everyone's trying to out-clever each other. And I think there's a real hole in the industry for mature, just grown-up filmmaking and grown-up filmmakers. And which is why I love Master and Commander, because there's nothing meta about this, nothing clever about this. This is just a great story. It's a movie for grown-ups.
Nice.
There's no sea beast coming out of this thing. We're not trying to parody the seagoing tradition. This is a real film for real grown folks to watch. So how do you feel about this as a grown folks movie? And our grown folks movie is dying.
I think I actually agree with you on both fronts, because a lot of people have never heard of this movie. I remember I actually saw it in theaters when I was in Halifax. On the theater on
Spring Maritime town, by the way. Halifax.
Yeah.
A lot of ship industry there.
Yeah.
By the way, the mascot for Halifax is the Blue Nose, which is a sailing vessel.
It is a sailing vessel. Yeah, actually.
And I believe a lot of Master and Commander was shot in Halifax. A lot of Halifax crew members were on this movie as extras.
I believe so as well, yeah. So, it all came together for me there, I guess. But no, I totally agree on both fronts. Very mature movie. There's a lot of attention to detail. A lot of actors,
which I feel is pornographic at this point.
Oh, it's
the
fantastic.
level of detail, it was utterly sexual for me.
Yeah.
Loved it.
They didn't like gloss over anything. They didn't they didn't shy away from showing something that was maybe too technical for the layman to understand. Like, how they even did, like, I'll give you a prime example. A couple times they did it, like right in the first scene when we go in and they do that overhead pan shot, and then you catch the first kind of boat mention, and the one guy said, I think the very first line is like sand and broken shell, and that's
in the, what is that torpedo thing they throw in the water to get
forget what it's called, but they basically seeing the depth. It's like the depth finder.
It's like a cannonball as a cylinder, and they put wax in the bottom of it, and it strikes the bottom of the ocean, and you pull it out. And it's sort of similar to sort of like Star Trek, where they're like, what's going on that planet over there? And you get a little report back. You get a little report back from this wax thing where it shows you sand and broken shell.
Yeah. So like, just fascinating little detail that Peter Weir threw in there. And from what I understand, they filmed this on a ship. Like, they basically lived the lifestyle that they were supposed to. So you got Russell Crowe and the doctor and the officers all on one level, and then the crewmen, and then the Marines, and they all interacted and kind of lived this lifestyle while they were filming to kind of just keep the realism alive, which I thought was, a nice touch for sure. And just even the language.
It was interesting that a lot of the officers on the ship were actually teenagers or almost preteen children.
Yeah.
Sort of upper class kids who are officers, and they outrank these grown, crusty seamen.
Yeah,
sailors,
the
these
hold
hard
fast.
Sailors.
Yeah. And that's due to education, right? And station back home in England. right? So if they were the son of a lord or the son of somebody in politics or something to that effect, they were fast tracked. They were considered highfalutin and could be officers, and they went at a young age, and then and they were respected because, like Russell Crowe says, this ship is England. It's representative. They try to keep it as representative of the homeland, England, as they can, beyond what him and Stephen Maturin, the doctor there, which was Paul Bettany, his character, beyond what they they have a lot of discussion throughout this film about tyranny and oppression and so the ship is a metaphor for society because it is in fact a society, and so you get information about that throughout the whole film and little glimpses of that, especially through the conversations between Maturin and Captain Jack Aubrey, Russell Crowe.
Yeah, I love the bromance between one of the great bromance movies of all time, by the way, between Maturin and the captain. I found it very strikingly similar to the relationship between Captain Kirk and Spock in Star Trek.
Yeah.
And how Kirk is like the risk taker, the bad boy. He's like, let's get him, boys. And Spock is the science man. He's more down to earth. He seems removed and above what's happening at all times. But they had this strong kind of bond.
Yeah.
So I actually looked it up, but Star Trek did come out before this. So I don't think Star Trek based their relationship on this. And I also think it was the other way around too. But it was interesting because Star Trek and shows like that are similar to nautical movies, nautical shows. A lot, you're on a vessel, you're getting reports back, you're doing battle with other vessels, and a lot of the storytelling techniques are similar in a spacecraft as well as a seagoing vessel, I found.
Yeah. The one difference I would say, just if we're gonna draw that comparison, notice in this film, all dudes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Glengarry Glen Ross style, like all
yes,
guys.
Sir. Yeah.
Star Trek not so much, because I guess in the future they'd moved past that kind of only men can go to sea or space. But interesting you note about the Maturin Jack Aubrey relationship. If you go to the
bromance, man.
Yeah, the bromance. If you go to the books, this isn't the first in the series. It's actually it's a mixture of a couple in the series, actually, because for American markets, the one that is The Far Side of the World, the actual book, they fight the Americans. But when they made this movie, they felt the Americans weren't going to want to watch them be the bad guys. So to make it palatable for American markets, they made it a French ship that was built in the U.S.
Smart. No one likes the French, by the way.
Just dump on the French. It's fine. Yep. And so Maturin is actually the background on him, and they were going to do more of these movies and get into this. But Maturin is Irish and Spanish, so he's Catalan, I think. And he's
funny because Paul Bettany looks neither Irish nor Spanish.
Yeah, nothing. He looks
Welsh. And his accent is British. Which I found offensive for him to play an Irishman with a British accent. Personally, I felt offensive.
American markets. But he's a spy. He's a major spy, and his cover is...
Who's he spying for?
He's spying for the British, and every mission these guys go on, he's got a little side quest that goes on.
So interesting.
So his cover is he's a ship's doctor, because he is a ship's doctor, and he's a good doctor. But also he's like this spy, and he's kind of a badass. Like he's good at sword fighting. He's good at diplomacy and stuff like that. So he's an interesting dude, which I think Bettany really leaned into that. Because there was kind of this quiet, you don't know everything about him at all times, right? Like he has his hobbies and whatnot, but there's more to him than what you see. And then with the whole, he's very anarchist, that comes from his Irish side. He likes to fight out against monarchy and oppression and stuff like that. So very interesting stuff. Just a few facts I wanted to kind of warm up with before we actually got into it.
That's very interesting. So I just took him as a straight nerd. I had no idea he was like this badass double agent spy.
Yeah.
But if he's spying for the crown and he's on a British vessel, is he spying? What is he trying to accomplish exactly?
So why they didn't cover it in this, but in the book, when they were going to the far side of the world to stop some French or U.S. ship, he was spying. he was going to, I think, mainland Brazil or something, and he had some thing to do there that they covered up. I hadn't read this one in a long time, but there was he had some side mission to do, and that's why he was going over there with the surprise.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Man, it just sounds way cooler now.
Yeah,
that you brought that up.
It gets very intense.
Interesting. Okay. Shall we dive in to the chronology of the food in Master and Commander?
Yeah, let's do it. Some interesting food. I remember you sending me a message during the week being like, I don't know what any of this is, man.
Yeah, shout out to Jeremy on this one, because I really didn't think we had a podcast. I had no idea what the food was, and then literally 2 hours later you sent me a Google Doc with all of the food and like notes, historical notes on it. And so I think we should just dive in and just start. This, I feel like the food in this movie, in the past, the food we've analyzed has been more used to examine metaphorically what the movies are about through character and plot. I think the food in this movie will be almost mostly historical, as explaining what it is and how it's used on a ship, which I think is great. I can't wait to learn a thing or two from Jeremy, who's read this book.
Well, see, I may be wrong too, and as always, if you think I'm wrong and want to call me an idiot, comments down below.
Comment down below. So, not sure if this is a food scene or not, but as soon as we enter the movie, it's at night. The HMS Surprise is mostly asleep, but there are some lookouts. We think we see the privateer, the Acheron. Actually, they cross
Acheron. Yep, the Phantom.
Pacific. But, and this is something I didn't know, I always wondered how you feed a crew like this. I remember reading through history that these ships would go across continents, across oceans for months at a time. I was like, how do these people eat? Do they just fish all day? But in this movie, thank God, they actually address it, which I don't think any movies have done. Yeah. We see livestock on the ship: cows, goats, chickens.
Couple chickens.
By the way, chickens, great food, I imagine. A great animal to take on a ship.
Yeah.
Just pumping out those eggs, man. Just
you saw the goat and the cow, so dairy. You're getting goats and cow milk, eggs, and then in a pinch, you have, you kill a cow. That's beef for the whole crew, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure that they had, more than one, and depending on the animal, maybe more than one gender, so that they could make more, because these were long trips. But I always think when I see this movie, and that little detail in the beginning when you see the livestock, how much would it suck to be a cow on a British fighting vessel? Like that's a one-way trip. You're not coming back.
No. And you're just stuck in that little room all day long with these crappy roommates all the time. Yeah.
And then, every now and again they get into a fight and a cannonball comes screaming through. And you didn't do anything. You wanted to be in a field.
Oh, the contrast of a cow's life in a field, just happy-go-lucky.
Oh, yeah,
just looking out at the horizon, chewing on some grass.
The whole floor is food.
Unbelievable! You're standing in a salad at all times.
Yeah,
just hanging out with your boys, hanging out with your buddies, and eating whatever you want. Just go ahead, eat the grass.
Just lean down. It's not. There's nothing to it. On a boat, it's much different.
All of a sudden, you're on a boat, just confused. How did I get here? Just the worst. Shout out to the cows.
Yeah. Shout out to those naval cows.
All right. Did you want to? So I think it's great that for them to immediately show us that. I think was great, because immediately we're getting into the details here.
Answers a lot of questions.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot of people like myself, that was one of the mysteries of naval voyages we've always had, which is oh, you know what? We're going to answer that right now. Surprise and delight you right now. Here you go. We actually have livestock on these ships.
Yeah.
So it's great we get that inside baseball through, I guess, the food cultivation on the ship.
Yeah. And it's just, it's not even they don't even hang on it for too long. It's just a kind of a panning shot to kind of see daily life. And and they do this a lot in this movie. You're just kind of seeing just what's going on day by day, which I found interesting.
Absolutely. Now, the officer who sees the boat.
Yeah.
I forget his name.
Hallam.
Hallam. So, Hallam. So immediately we see this guy, and what I don't like about this and other movies is that this guy is meant to be a weak guy.
Yeah.
We see that immediately. He's unsure of himself.
Yeah.
He doesn't know, doesn't have confidence. And we can feel that on him. We're like, we feel weird around the guy.
Yeah.
We don't want him to be in charge either.
And they cast that perfectly. That guy was the perfect kind of just like, clearly daddy got him into the Navy.
Yeah.
And he's moving his way up. He's very smart. There's a point where Russell Crowe says, like, you know this, you got this. Your only problem is managing the crew. Like, so clearly it puts him at odds with us. It puts him at odds with the crew, because the crew, you know, go back to a Star Trek movie or any movie about the Navy. It's like, we never second guess the officers, never second guess the officers, and the officers can never second guess themselves. They have to look decisive at all times. And that's why his buddy there, Calamé, he chimes in. He says, we're going to beat to quarters. I don't care if everyone has to get woken up. We're doing this.
Yeah.
Be decisive.
Yeah. It was a very interesting character, because you can just feel it on him, just his physicality and how, he had this very beta submissive type of energy, which, I mean, these are hardened seamen. They're not going to respect you. They can just feel it on you, you know? Yeah.
They know. Right. And that's like perfect. Few minutes, didn't have to say anything, didn't have to like, oh, Hollum is a real, you know, he's really indecisive. They didn't have to
grown folks filmmaking, you know? Yeah.
They just, if you're observant and you pay attention to detail, you'll get a lot of these about these characters just from their actions.
Absolutely. So that happens. We see these instances of livestock on the ship. Great scenes as far as I'm concerned. At minute 26, we see, as far as I'm concerned, the most food porny of the food shots on this movie, which is the baked cheese coming out of the George. Tell us what it is, Jeremy.
Yeah, well, the baked cheese. So prior to that, we saw Killick preparing breakfast. He's pulling eggs out of a chicken coop. So that continued the livestock thing. And I thought that was interesting, because probably, judging by the amount of chickens, probably those were just for the officers or for the captain. Like, those might have been the captain's chickens, because he's just grabbing a couple eggs. And Killick
Can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
Is there a specific chicken for the captain? And is that chicken considered the captain of the chickens?
Oh, potentially. I have no idea. But that would make sense. But
that's interesting.
The amount of fresh eggs that chicken could put out a day, that's probably for the officers, or that's probably, especially because Killick's doing it. And so I just wanted to segue into the scene where he's baking the cheese on toast, because he's an important character. He's Captain Lucky Jack's steward. And even off the ship, he basically is just this guy's manservant. And he's this grumpy, you see him talking with his crew in the kitchen, and he's always grumpy. He's always
very surly guy.
Always pissed off. And not the brightest. He's not he's not an officer, but he's
a manservant for a reason, bro.
He's earned this role, and there are a lot of perks that come with this role. In that he gets to drink some of the captain's booze, and he gets to, probably eat some of the captain's food, which is markedly better than what's being served below decks, as we'll see later. So he's cooking cheese on toast, which is cooked in what's called a Georgian chafing dish, which is the equivalent of a toaster. It's this metal box. They put the toast in, and it's a ship's biscuit. It's basically a biscuit, and we see them a few times. Sometimes they have maggots in them, sometimes they don't. And everyone on the boat eats that. So even the guys below will eat the crew below will eat the ship's biscuits. That's just kind of a daily staple. Like, it's probably rationed to them. And then they put some cheese on top of that, which I would assume is coming from the goat or the cow, or they're bringing it on, and then put over a fire and melted and toasted like that. It looks delicious.
It does look delicious, yeah.
And Killick's complaining about the music that Captain and Matron are about to play. Matron's a cellist. The Captain plays the fiddle, and he's saying scrape, scrape, scrape. There's not a tune you can dance to. So he doesn't like their music. It's too upper class, too highfalutin for him. So another little detail there, just to get the separation of who's who and what's what. And they like to have this cheese on toast as a snack while they're playing and drinking their wine or whatever it is.
I would too. It looked fantastic. The Georgian chafing dish looked resplendent, just really, really bougie looking.
Nice.
And Yeah, sorry.
Oh, no, I was saying nice detail because at the beginning we saw that 1805, this takes place 1805, Georgian England, George III was the monarch. Mm-hmm. Shout out George III.
Oh, that's a George
during the Napoleonic Wars there. And so now I guess we'd be in Charles England? Elizabethan, Charlethan? Charlotte?
Sure. I'll go with it.
I don't know.
I don't know
what the age of England is, but something.
But listen, if King George gave us a Georgian chafing dish, I call that a win for his reign.
They had a chafing dish, and I think they just called it a Georgian chafing dish because of I don't think he invented it personally.
Well, his name is on it, and
his name is on it.
As far as I'm concerned, that's a win for George.
For Big George III.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, moving on. Minute 29. Two crewmen present Acheron with a ship, which is a model of. Sorry, they present the Captain Jack with a ship of the Acheron, which is a scale model of the. He says it's exact to detail, which is kind of hard to imagine he could make that exact to detail, but he does. And the men are rewarded with what?
A ration, and what is it? An extra ration of rum for these gentlemen. So
let's talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, very important. I think glossing over entirely that Worley there has a photographic memory and seeing the ship in passing when he was in the U.S. for his sister's wedding.
This kid is a genius. This is like a tech nerd before tech nerds.
He was able to give it to his buddy there, and he was able to knock it up. But clearly, nice scene detail-wise, because they're going to be important down the line. These two are buddies. They're close friends, close enough that they're going to share this stuff and go together. And Worley's not going to, screw over his friend and just tell the captain about it. They go together, they work together, and they get a prize. They get this extra ration of rum. Now, in the Navy in the UK, and I'm sure other navies around the world, even still to this day, there's booze ration. I'm not sure if they drink anymore, but there used to be a booze ration.
That was a big tradition among I hate saying seamen. It's just, what can we call these guys?
It's able seamen.
Able seamen?
Yeah, seafaring men.
Please, advertisers, don't think less of us for calling them seamen.
The name of this episode, Able Seamen.
I'm going to call them crewmen because let's just make our lives easier. Okay.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah. So I had always known there was a tradition of drinking rum from the childhood stories I read about pirates mostly. But you're saying it's a real thing. They did have a ration of rum. It was one of the things which made the boredom tolerable, being at sea for so many days.
Well, when you're off watch, what do? You sleep, obviously, and any recreational time when you're below decks and you're not on watch, have a couple of cocktails. Why not? So it's interesting. We'll get into it because there's a lot of booze scenes in this. So we'll get into it. But rum is the first kind of alcohol that's mentioned.
And do you know why it was rum specifically? Was it just the cheapest rum they could get? The cheapest alcohol they could get?
Well, a lot of these ships, through trade, the triangular trade, they would come through the Caribbean. So they would get rum through the Caribbean. And then so it was probably easy for them to stock up rum on their way down. So right now, if you want to know, it's good to point out where the ship is right now. They're off the coast of Brazil, like the middle of Brazil somewhere. And they're heading south to catch the Acheron before it crosses the Cape. It shoots the Cape to go around into the Pacific waters and take the war there, because there's British whaling fleets all up in the Pacific waters, and they're basically going to sink them and take them a prize, because the Acheron's what's called a privateer. And a privateer is a ship that's, may not be part of the French Navy, but it is commissioned by the King of France to go and do that. And every country had privateers.
They're basically like bounty hunters, but at ships. Anyone can hire these guys to do whatever business you need done militarily on the high seas. They could be hired by the Queen if they wanted. If they paid enough.
Yeah, it's a pirate that has been given.
That has been hired by a government, basically. Yeah,
given what's called a letter of marque, and they can go and attack the enemies of said country, or be attacked by the enemies of said country. So, interesting fact. But yeah, rum. They probably picked up a bunch of rum on their way through in Cuba or one of the British islands around there when they were refitting, because to get from England to the Caribbean probably took a while. So yeah, rum is there for that reason. And we'll see different things they do with rum as we continue on.
Okay, as after a encounter with the Acheron, the HMS Surprise is badly damaged and manages to get away. And going against his crew's advice to limp their way back to England for repairs, Captain Jack decides to actually stop. I believe, was it the Galápagos Islands, or was it another Caribbean island? It was some kind of Caribbean island.
They hadn't shot the Cape yet, so basically they pulled over into Brazil.
Brazil, right?
Like they probably found an inlet. They refit at sea. The one guy who's buddy there, the sailing master, Alan, the big kind of portly gentleman with the curly gray hair.
Yeah, great face on that guy.
He's one of my favorite characters, but he's always getting shut down. Like he's like Worf from Star Trek. He's always getting shut down.
In every movie too.
Yeah. He's like, I respect your knowledge in these things, but I'm doing it my way. Like, and he's just like, all right.
God, poor guy.
Yeah, the guy just eats it for the whole movie. It's fantastic.
Right. So Captain Jack pulling a very Captain Kirk move to not play it safe and limp home. We're going to refit at sea at these islands, these tropical islands, where they take on provisions and begin repairing the ship. The provisions I thought were really interesting. A lot of tropical fruits, bananas, mangoes. They were throwing a lot of things at them. I feel like women, like the native women, were kind of flirting with the men.
Trying to flirt, because they, trade is trade. You trade whatever you want. Nothing's illegal. But yeah,
I read on the internet once that there was a similar situation where a ship was refitting in a tropical island, and they realized that the women would trade sex for any kind of metal.
Oh, interesting.
And so all of the iron on the ship started disappearing, and the men literally started pulling the nails out of the ship because they needed, they're at sea for a long time, man. They needed
seems a little bit counterproductive in the end, if but all right, whatever. That's desperation. But they're interesting enough as well. I saw some citrus fruit going on the boat,
which they needed to stave off scurvy.
And so fruit and fresh provisions were great. So that's the other thing. Like they would load on things as they went, because they'd be at sea for so long. So an interesting kind of good detailed scene, and you hear the people in the background saying, "This is a ship of the Royal Navy, not some sort of bordello or whatever," and they're all kind of being funny and crazy. But great scene, and Russell makes eye contact with the thing. And I lied before when I said there were no women. This is actually the only scene with women in the movie, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, no lines for the women, which I don't think would fly in today's political climate. But historically accurate, I guess.
Totally. Yeah, you couldn't have women on board a ship.
Right. That was considered bad luck, right?
Yeah, and
it would just cause problems. Let's be honest. It would cause problems.
Yeah, it's not a good environment.
These guys are basically cavemen.
It's got to be one of the most toxic masculine environments.
Oh yeah,
ever.
Yeah.
Probably not a great place for women. Although within the book series, there are a lot of instances where women are on board for certain voyages and stuff like that. So Patrick O'Brian breaks this rule a lot in these stories.
Okay, moving along. Minute 31. Captain is having a raucous time with the officers. They all seem to be inebriated, and they're basically going over their plan as to what to do next. And you mentioned they're drinking either port or sherry,
or it could be wine as well. Could be wine. They drink a lot of claret.
Is this something that would happen frequently every night? This seems like a very sailory, stereotypical thing to do, to just be at night having their drinks and basically just slapping each other's backs and
having a great time. So this is a good point or a good moment to point out that there are 3 different meal sets on these ships. There's
interesting. Okay.
The crew meal, which is usually down below, and we'll get to that. We see that a couple times. There's the officers' mess, which we don't see in this movie, where it's not the captain, because sometimes the captain can eat alone, or with with the doctor or whatever. There's a separate meal where just the officers can eat. Then there's the captain's mess, where it's like the captain and whoever he invites. And so he invites. You notice in some
Can we
scenes.
stop for a sec? Sorry.
Yeah.
Can we just stop for a sec?
Sorry about that, folks. We had a little bit of an audio issue. Jeremy is discussing the different meals on board the HMS Surprise. Please go ahead, Jer.
Yeah, so I was just going to finish by saying the captain's mess, which is what we're seeing now. Most of the main officers, so you'll see Al in there a lot of the time. The one guy that's the head of the Royal Marines, I forget his name. He's kind of an important character, sort of. He's the redcoat. And he's there usually because he's their leading officer, and then the lower guys, like the lieutenants, the lieutenants below, like Hollum and Calamy and Blakeney, the younger fellas, they'll rotate in and out. So sometimes Calamy will be there, sometimes Blakeney will be there. They're not lieutenants, they're midshipmen. So the midship's mess is kind of that officer's mess, and we do see it later on when Hollum's panicking. He goes and hides behind them in the midship mess. So there 3 or 4 different meals going on these boats at any given time at 3 or 4 different levels of kind of luxury, and this is the top level.
Do we know what kind of food? I guess the lower level, like just the regular dudes. What
So we get into that if we keep going down the list.
Okay. We'll save it for that.
We get into that. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so next we get minute 33. Very significant food moment in the film when it's actually written into the script. Aubrey has a great joke about salt. Can you explain the relationship between him and Lord Nielsen? Possibly?
This is a huge important plot point.
Yeah, explain the joke and explain how it's
thing.
significant. Yeah.
So I'll go significance and then the joke because it sets up the joke way better.
Okay.
The significance of it is that Blakely earlier on, he gets his arm shot off or something, and he's talking to the captain about Lord Nelson, and he gives him a book, gives the kid a book because he's laid up in the sick bay about Lord Nelson. And I guess Blakeney gossips to Calamy, the other midshipman there, who says, oh, he knows he sailed with Lord Nelson, which to all of these people, Lord Horatio Nelson is a god. He's a hero. He won the Nile. He's beat the Spanish. He's one of these amazing tacticians, and they all love him because he's basically the creme de la creme of what they do, right? So for us in advertising, it's the Bill Burnback, or for people in film, it's like Spielberg or Kubrick or somebody, right? Like he's at the top of his game. This is
the Tom Brady of naval combat.
Yeah, Tom Brady of naval combat. And there's always anecdotes about him, like, go straight at him. He wasn't a great sailing tactician, but he just said go straight at him, which is how Jack kind of lives his life. That's a metaphor for Jack, right? So Jack is kind of an underling. He sailed with Lord Horatio Nelson at the Nile. And so the midshipmen who never would have had the chance are always asking him about him or wants to know about him. And like, they didn't have TV or anything like that. So what's the next best thing is an anecdote. And so an anecdote from somebody who served with Nelson to these guys, to these young kids who are aspiring to be Nelson, is like, it's like gold to them. It's like, it's pornography to them. And
this is like the time that I asked Mario for an anecdote about Joe Pitka, the legendary commercial director from the 80s. I was just hanging on every word, just like, tell me more stories, Uncle Mario.
And Mario probably never met the guy, to be honest. But
I didn't care. He told a great story about him.
But so this story is that he basically, the Calamy asks him for a story and is all like intent, and Jack sees this, and they love to mess with each other. So he goes, the first time I talked to him, I'll never forget it, like building and building and building. And, he looked across from me at the table and he said, Aubrey, can I trouble you for the salt? Which is just like the most fall flat on your face story. And Jack, it helps build his character because because he's funny. He tries to be funny. Not really that funny, but
Also very reminiscent of the Norm Macdonald moth joke, where the
Yeah.
punchline is just like,
Yeah.
"What? Come on, man."
Good build, flat on your face punchline, but it also
Makes it funny that way, the way the delivery. Yeah.
exactly, and great detail about the scene. You see Calamy's head drop, like, oh, like, because it's kind of at his expense, and also he really wanted to hear this story. And everyone else in the room, all the kind of sycophantic officers, break out into this kind of like forced laughter. Some of them seem to be finding it pretty funny, but it's like the captain made a joke. Laugh sign is on. Start.
By the way,
laughing.
that is a great advice for anyone in corporate America. If the boss makes a joke, you act like it's the funniest thing you've ever heard in your life. You'll thank me later. Go ahead.
Absolutely. So great scene, which kind of leads us into the same scene. I think there's another food thing in here, isn't there?
Oh, he's on a roll with the food jokes. He
Right.
loves the audience in this little meal he's got going. So he makes a joke about weevils, which I thought weevils were just some kind of toy from the 80s. Apparently, weevils are an actual
I think
insect.
those are Weebelows was the toy, wasn't it?
Oh,
Weevil?
okay. I don't know. But,
weevils is what they call a maggot.
right.
And those are in the ship's biscuits. We see the ship biscuit, which is food. And interesting, this is kind of, remember at the beginning we were talking about Maturin's kind of the anarchy guy, and Aubrey's the law and order guy. And so they kind of represent the dichotomy on this ship of, at any given point it can descend into anarchy very quickly. And, the number of officers is small. The people below are, many. And like you mentioned, a lot of the officers are just kids. So, Hold Fast could destroy them all in a fight, I'm sure. But they don't.
Yeah, the kid with the one arm would stand no chance
he's
against the
done.
dude with the knuckles tatted up. I mean,
So they have this whole kind of hierarchy, like a prison almost, right?
Well, it's military, it's social, it's a lot of things. Yeah.
Yeah, there's a society here.
Yeah, and the officers do have an ongoing anxiety. Like, there's always that thing of, I hope these guys don't mutiny. Like, as much as we're in charge, all it takes is a little bit of a spark, and these guys could just take us out if they wanted to.
Exactly. And so the joke here, we come out from another Nelson story where, it's kind of it's the antithesis to the salt joke. It's this really kind of deep story about how he doesn't need a boat cloak because his zeal for king and country keeps him warm, and all the officers are like, oh yeah. But Maturin kind of rolls his eyes and he says, it would be the exception to the rule that authority corrupts. Right?
Ooh, I like this guy, man. This guy is punk rock. I like this guy.
Exactly. And Aubrey, being his best friend, he knows what he's all about. And so he takes this joke as kind of all right, buddy, you're getting a little serious.
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a joke, but the joke has a little meaning, right? So he asks him, which weevil would you choose? And he's, he knows that Aubrey's really into insects.
Yeah, Aubrey's like this weird animal nerd. He loves
Maturin. He knows.
Maturin's an animal nerd. He's a naturalist.
He's a naturalist.
He enjoys examining small animals of all kind, but
varying animals. So he says, which one would you pick? And he says, oh, they're the same species of Calculia, and but this one's bigger, so I would pick it. And then the joke being, in the service, you always choose the lesser of two weevils, which is a pun.
That's a knee slapper right there.
Yeah, that's a
let's
pun.
Let's go.
And then they toast with wine to the lesser of two weevils. Which is kind of a funny way of answering the authority corrupts and all this stuff, right?
This is a common kind of humor within armed services.
Yeah.
They're always taking shots at the authority, how they don't know what they're doing. You know what I mean? And how everything's a compromise. And there's a level of humor as to the incompetence of the organization you work for that I think is healthy, probably.
Probably, yeah. I mean, to a point. Before it becomes mutiny. Yeah.
All right, moving on to minute 35. One more toast. Good.
Yeah, they toast.
Heavy. Yeah, a lot of good times, a lot of good feelings, got good emotions with this toast. Really enjoyed the camaraderie with the crew.
And they're all pretty wasted at this point. They're having
all pretty wasted, loving life. This is what they're on the sea for. It's for the party. Let's be honest. Yeah. We're out here. We're basically astronauts in our society right now. We're just out here on the sea. We don't know what we're going to find. Yeah. There could be dragons. We don't know. We're just going to find out.
Yeah, I have no idea.
And then they get to minute 36. Coffee on the quarterdeck, which I thought we should have a new segment for great titles of movies and or books. Coffee on the quarterdeck, great title.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this scene is fascinating to me because, and I'm not sure if it's coffee or tea. I think in the movie they probably went with tea, but in the books, Aubrey and Maturin, there are plenty of scenes where they drink coffee together. They're coffee guys because they need to stay awake at certain points. They love their coffee. So I said coffee because if you know the books, that's what they usually drank. But you see that all the officers and the midshipmen are kind of up on the quarterdeck, and all the crewmen are down below, and the crewmen are having their party, and then Hollum chimes in, and they're singing Spanish Ladies, a sea shanty, and Hollum jumps in with this like kind of very posh rendering of it, and all the other
he has
people.
a lovely voice too,
Yes.
which is the ironic thing.
What a strangely true voice Hollum possesses, right?
Yeah, he had the voice of an angel.
The voice of an angel.
Everyone's looking at him sideways, like, why are you ruining the party, bro?
Yeah, and Worley just looks over and he's like, all right, let's start a different song.
So cringy. I felt bad for the guy at that point. I'm like,
yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Great scene. So, and an interesting scene just about the different levels and like how the officers are almost looking down on these guys. And that's how they all want it. Everyone wants it that way. They don't want any kind of commingling here. Right?
No, this is serious business. You're on a ship. You have anything could happen. You have to have a strong system of authority, a chain of command. Otherwise, you don't want things getting out of control. So I think they all recognize that.
Hierarchy.
Yeah. You mentioned in your notes here, the crew eating something below deck, most likely duff, which I don't even know what duff is. And I was wondering if you could explain that because...
Yeah, so was it minute 43?
Minute 43, yeah.
Yeah, crew eating. So they're eating below deck. I don't know what this was, but it looked like a stew. And so I did a little research, and in the book also, they eat, a lot of the time they eat what's called lobscouse and duff. This didn't look like a stew.
That's a great comedy team, I think, on vaudeville as well.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But they had this other food, which was, the lobscouse was stew, and duff was this kind of weird pudding-y thing, and that's kind of what it looked like. It looked like it was white with some other things in it. And in the book,
what was in the stew? What's in lobscouse? Do you know what that is?
The stew would have been whatever meat they had, and it was just kind of a built-up stew because you have to understand that there's hundreds of these guys, and they have to feed all of them or watches worth of them, and so they basically need something that they can all eat quick, something that's going to fill them up because these guys work hard.
So it's a meat-based stew with whatever they have, basically?
Stew, yeah. High in calories. And then the duff being kind of, I guess, their dessert. It's like sometimes I've heard it called figgy dowdy, stuff like that. Like these British, some sort of British pastry.
I love these names, man. Figgy dowdy. God damn.
Which is just like
that could be a punk rock band in like the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so it's just another one of these seafaring foods that is interesting, but totally shows the contrast between what the guys upstairs are eating and what the people below deck are eating. And it's not even close to the same. But you notice how the one little guy or one guy brings it to the old guy. They have their own hierarchy down there.
Yes, the crew does. Yeah. The older guys are older guys, So
yeah, Lofty, the cabin boy, the little, the little kids that run the gunpowder to the cannons. Like they hired little kids for that because they could get through all the chaos easier.
Same reason they hired them from coal mines, smaller trenches.
They can fit, right?
Yeah.
So very, very interesting.
Yeah, so I guess lobscouse is, I guess, the ramen noodles of the seafaring trade.
It's just a big stew.
Struggle food for the lower classes.
Working class food for working class people.
Yes, sir. More chicken coop at 47, minute 47. And this was interesting. Minute 47 as well. They say water in the grog. The grog is what they call the alcohol, or is it specifically rum? Can you explain grog for us a little bit?
I will. I think this is a good point because now we're going through. We've seen two different kinds of alcohol. We've heard about the toasting wine, or port, or sherry, or claret, which is dessert wine, and the rum. So when they ration rum, what they do to make rum last longer is they'll add that rum to a barrel, and the barrel will have freshwater rum, some sort of citrus sometimes to ward off scurvy, and so you get more of it. And, who's to say that Worley and his buddy there didn't take their rum ration and put it in the grog to strengthen up the grog for the rest of the crew as well. You never know if they shared or they just drank the rum. But grog is watered down rum.
Okay.
And so I was going to
I must say, it really needs to rebrand to change its name to something else. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was going to drink some. I was going to have some for this episode. A little too early in the day for me. It's 5 o'clock at sea somewhere. But
yeah, I noticed your recipe. Other than the water, it does sound like it's rum, lemon juice, cinnamon. It does sound pretty good, other than the watering down.
And they would put any spices like cinnamon or nutmeg in there just to give it a little extra flavor.
Sounds good.
But to make it last longer, they would add water. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the more watered down the grog gets, the less fun you're having. So this is why they complain about watering down the grog.
This might be, I guess, the origin of a lot of the tropical alcoholic drinks, because you think water, rum, lemon juice, cinnamon. You just replace water with some kind of juice, and you got yourself the beginnings of
rum punch.
Yeah, these
put
tropical
some
drinks.
Cola in there. You got a Cuba Libre.
Tiny umbrella. We're good.
Yeah.
Okay, now following up on the grog, at minute 53, prior to this, one of the crew, I'm not saying seamen, we're not going to do that. One of the crew, one of the younger members, in an unfortunate accident, his friend is being dragged behind the ship, clutching one of the mainsails that has fallen down. Yeah. And the sail is dragging behind the ship with some ropes. They're in rough seas, and it becomes apparent that they need to cut away the dragging sail and sacrifice this poor young man who's holding on to it for his life. And the person who does the cutting of the ropes is one of his friends.
Yeah. So,
go ahead.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
No.
These are the same two guys this is Worley and his buddy that brought the ship to him before.
Okay.
Yeah. So these guys, we've set up that they're close
friends.
Please
tell me, the guy, was the nerd who made the ship who dies?
Yeah, the guy whose sister got married in the U.S., who had a photographic memory, made the ship. That's the guy they cut loose.
No.
That was Worley, yeah.
He was my candidate for spin-off movie. I want to see where that nerd ends up. I guarantee you that guy started some kind of shipbuilding company.
Building of ships in the U.S. somewhere,
Yeah. Oh,
no, he didn't. Well, he might have made it. So
no, come on.
Interesting. They were near land when they did that, because what they were doing at that point, and it's good to kind of check in on where they are at this point. They followed the Acheron all the way down to Cape Horn, and they were shooting the Cape. So
very important in nautical language, I guess.
History, shooting Cape Horn, because
that's I believe you get a tattoo if you sail through there and you shoot Cape Horn.
Yeah, if you shot Cape Hope or Cape Horn or Cape of Good Hope, there are different tattoos you can get. Yeah. So just an interesting point about location. We were halfway up Brazil when the Acheron first attacked. Then we spotted them further south. Now they're shooting the Cape. They were chasing them, but then Hollam's watch was on that back sail there. That sail went into the water. Hollam chickened out. So now it's, evidence is piling up against Hollam. People are not liking this guy. Worley goes overboard. His buddy has to actually hatchet him loose. And it's another kind of thing in society is, do we risk one person's life to save the many? That whole dichotomy.
This is that old problem of the rail car situation, where you ask a person, when do you, if there's a rail car, a train coming and one person is in front of it, do you throw the switch which kills all the people on the train?
Yeah.
But then you just keep stacking up people. Like, how many does it take for you to... So
that's an ethical dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Which is an important point in this thing, because remember, think of it as a society, right? One to save the many. And clearly, Russell Crowe is a believer of kill one to save the many. Which, ethics.
Yeah, well, it was tough for the young man to literally cut his friend loose like that and look him in the eyes while he does it. Oh, that was a tough one. And as most young men would do in a situation like that, he decides to drown his sorrows in some grog.
Yeah, he's getting a little lit below deck.
Yep.
And that makes sense.
Yeah. And so he's simmering and things are bubbling up, which are not going to end up well for Hullum, I believe. That's his name, right? The guy? Yeah. Minute 54, Killick cutting up veg. Again, he's doing his job, very surly about it, though.
Yeah,
not very happy. It seems like a grizzly.
Always complaining. Yeah.
Absolutely. Minute 55, Aubrey's drinking some wine.
Contrasting to
oh, yeah, he had a good note about this. Go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
Yeah, contrasting to Buddy Below drinking the grog. Russell Crowe, he's upset by what he just commanded that person to do, but he had to make that decision. In the service, you always have to choose the lesser of two evils, right? So he had to make that choice to what he believed was the lesser of two evils. And he, that didn't sit well with him. So he's drinking too.
Yeah, they had that real Captain Kirk, Captain Spock conversation about, I feel bad about this. And the doctor is like, look, man, when I lose a patient, I don't blame myself. It's just the guy got shot by somebody. I did my best. So yeah. 58. Oh, I noticed this one. Toasting the northward turn. Is that a tradition? Do they do that?
No, but they were excited about it because you could imagine. Mm-hmm. So what they did was they lost that sail shooting the Cape. And so to avoid the weather, they turned south. And they headed down south, probably close to Antarctica, because if you look at it, the bottom of the Cape and Antarctica aren't that far away.
Yeah.
And it gets cold down there. So they're all cold, and you see a scene, they're playing with ice on the deck. They're all wearing their deck coats and stuff like that. But being down there probably sucks. These ships don't have heating. It's probably not a nice experience. So we see that they're in the crew mess, I believe, or no, the officer's mess, or the captain's mess, I think. And they feel the ship turn. Maturin doesn't know what it is, and he says, "Oh, clearly something very nautical has happened." And they said, "Yeah, we've turned north." So they've done enough south. They've turned north, and now they're on the other side. They're on the Pacific. They're on the far side of the world, and they represent that with a toast. They're excited because now they get to go back to warm weather.
Yeah, he seems to Maturin seems to sort of pretend to be above all this nautical seamanship,
he doesn't know anything about it.
Yeah, he's like, "Oh, you guys, you have your little culture of your seagoing vessels. I'm not a part about that. I'm just here as a scientist. Have your fun,
Yeah, he doesn't
very dismissive.
He doesn't know what the weather gauge is in battle. He doesn't know a lot of these different naval kind of tactical things that they talk about, and they're always explaining it to him. So, and in the books, they hype that up even more. They have to help him on and off the boat because he always falls in the water, stuff like that. He's just not.
Oh, that's low-hanging fruit. Why would they do that? Come on, man.
He's a fish out of water, so to speak.
We get it. Okay, you're not comfortable. You really got to fall in the water every time you leave a boat? Come on. Bringing us to minute 58 and what I consider to be the best food scene in this movie, and one of the best food scenes that I can recall in my moving-going history. Of all, the way when he cuts that pudding, set it up, Jared. But this is a food scene that I remember always. It had a very strong effect on my it imprinted on my brain very much so. Go ahead, Jared.
Yeah, I'm just trying to find. I had a note about it.
Okay, so I'll just explain. So normally in a situation like this in a movie, there would be a scene where a map is spread out on the table. And we have tiny little models of ships, and the captain or somebody explains the maneuver they're going to use to foil this other enemy.
Yeah, or where they're going.
Map. Right.
Or plotting a course, yeah.
Yeah, in this instance, they had that same scene, but instead of having a map, they create a map of the Galapagos Islands using chocolate pudding, I believe.
Yeah. So it's chocolate pudding, and the ship, from what I understand, was made out of some sort of sugar, a pressed or a curled sugar, or like fondant. It was something very dessert-like. Yeah, something fondant-like, dessert-like. There's some chocolate in there as well. It is very elaborate. Clearly some sort of mint jelly to represent the water there.
Yeah, I was wondering what that was. It does look like jelly, yeah.
I seem to recall it being called mint jelly. And so he says to one of my favorite characters, which I think is the lieutenant, the first officer, is my favorite character now. I can't, Captain or Lieutenant Pullings. The guy he wears, he's kind of a young officer. He's got the face scar. He wears his hat in the modern fashion, north-south. He doesn't wear it. So it's an interesting side note. I like to go off on side notes.
Also strong candidate now that our nerd died. Also strong candidate for a spinoff.
Great character.
Guy. What happens on his ship we'll get to that, but he takes on the other ship anyway.
Amazing character. Just like the kind of the coolest guy on the ship. Young. Clearly Aubrey's grooming him to be the captain, not grooming him in any other way. Just grooming him to be the next captain. He's a lieutenant. He's the first officer. He knows his stuff. He knows it cold. You see him at times like checking the guns with the gun crews. Like he knows everything on the ship. And I said an interesting point. He wears his hat north-south, which is in this time considered very modern. Where you see captain, whenever Aubrey wears his hat, he wears what's called amidships. So
that's like the moose. You look like a moose when you do that.
Yeah. So he wears it like Napoleon wears his hat, like Nelson wore his hat, amidships, and Pullings wears what's called a thwartships.
Very fashion forward for Pullings, by the way.
Yeah.
Very daring to wear your hat in a different way like that. Also,
well, the young guys did that.
Yeah, this would be similar to the young guys who turned their baseball hats backwards.
Yeah,
and then
cocked them off to the side.
Yeah, just to piss off the old managers and media people, thinking, "Oh my God, he's wearing his baseball cap backwards. He doesn't respect the game." But similar with Pullings, I suppose.
Yeah. So just an interesting point. But so go back to the pudding. The importance of the pudding.
Very important.
He says for Lieutenant Pullings a piece of the Albemarle or Albemarle or something, which is Albemarle Island, which was turned into Isabella Island now. So if you know the Galapagos Islands, that's Isabella Island. He gives a piece of something to Maturin, who gets excited, and then the Acheron for me, and he eats the ship with the big spoon, which kind of a dick move because you still haven't served half the other guys, and you're just using the serving spoon to eat the food. Which he
really wanted to go with the comedy timing of 1, 2, 3. He wanted this for you, this for you, this for me. Yeah. He really usurped, I guess, the politeness of the situation to get his joke across. But
once again, the sailing master Alan gets screwed because now he's
always. Yeah. But those chocolate pudding Galapagos Islands, I have thought about those. I would say at least twice a month since I've seen that movie, which came out in 2002, I believe. I've thought about what those must have tasted like, and they just looked so good.
I could imagine it didn't taste great.
I know, but in the movie, it just looks good, and the way they just go at it just looks tremendous.
I don't want to know how Killick got that gelatin.
Right.
back to the ship's cows, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah, you might want to avoid the gelatin, but the actual chocolate Galapagos Islands, I'm diving in head first, and I'm not coming out until I've eaten the whole thing.
Look delicious.
Yeah. I'm a little worked up. I'm a
little fired up about the stew.
A little fired up about those chocolate islands, man. But man, they look good.
Yep.
Okay, minute 59. Officer's toast and a sea shanty. What?
Yeah, so this
Did they have it again?
They finish their pudding.
Yeah.
They do a toast, and and Alan, Sailing Master Alan, there he sings "Let the Waters Roll, Jack," which is a nice song because Lucky Jack. So I guess they kind of had
that is some great sucking up, by the way.
Yeah.
Singing a song with the guy's name like that, masterful politicking by that guy.
He's visually hammered, like his face is red. He just loves his captain. He will follow this man to the ends of the earth and back.
Yeah.
To the far side of the earth and back.
Give that guy a raise, man.
Yeah, love that guy.
God bless him. Yeah. 106. I did notice this when one of the crew members, they're outfitting on Galapagos Islands, I believe, or close to it. And one of them says that tortoises make good eating. And then you mentioned that Maturin wants to study the tortoises and not eat them. Yeah,
which is an interesting kind of, once again, a difference in class. Maturin being the kind of very wealthy, well-to-do physician who is a naturalist. So he's more interested in seeing what they're like. He's looking at them and amazed by them. But then all the kind of the crew guys and even some of the midshipmen and officers are like, yeah, let's eat those. Like,
I have the tortoises and turtles in general. There are certain animals I just have an aversion that I could ever eat them. I don't think I could eat a turtle. I just don't think I could do it.
I don't think it would.
There's something about them. There's something about them. They have a sort of special personality to them, which I find endearing.
They look wise. They
just look cool. They look like cool guys. You know, the chill dudes. I don't want to eat that, man. He looks like a cool guy.
Yeah, seems like a nice tortoise.
They could all be dicks. They really could be. I'd have no idea. I don't know what their personalities are like, but I'm just saying. And also,
tortoises are just racist.
Yeah, just super racist. And also, the snapping turtle kind of freaks me out because like,
they're jerks.
I'm slow. Bam! You know, it's like, what are you, man? Are you slow or are you fast? I don't like this snapping thing.
They're kind of jerks.
Definitely cool though. Pretty cool with the snap.
Oh yeah, amazing.
Okay. 111 extra rations of grog for all of you. Do you remember why he did that? They accomplished something to it.
So this is an important kind of. I probably should have elaborated on my note there, but they're doing gun training, and Aubrey in the books is super into gun training. He loves to make sure that his ship's gunnery is, and this is what separates him from a lot of the other ship's captains who are a little bit more just there for the. For the prestige, and they're
more executives. They're not really getting their hands dirty.
Exactly. They're not kind of man of the people captains. Yeah. And their ships are usually, they always say that captain is kind of his ship's very polished and, disciplined, but their guns are terrible. So Aubrey loves the guns, and getting it down to a minute, whatever, is impressive because you got to pull those guns back, reload them, and they know they're up against a ship that has double the guns. So the Surprise is an older frigate. It only has 10 guns aside, 10 cannons aside, and then the deck swivels and whatnot. The Acheron is way out of its class. It's a bigger frigate it's a 40 gun ship, so 20 aside, so 2 levels. So they need to do 2 broadsides to every 1 broadside to match the amount of firepower going across between the 2 ships. So that's why he's trying to hit that time, and that's why he's trying to hit that buoy to get them accurate. So, and you see really...
Getting those reps in, just like, let's get these... Yeah, they want it to be like those NASCAR guys who can change a tire in less than 10 seconds.
Yeah, super important. So everyone on the ship gets an extra ration of grog, so they get another cup of grog because that's their reward, right? So you can see how alcohol's a currency as well. It keeps the men in line below decks as a positive reinforcement, but also it keeps the men in line sometimes as like the way to drown their sorrows too, right? Which we can see the danger. They're walking a fine line. That comes into play later.
Yeah. And I thought this was an interesting note at minute 111. Killick is preparing Soused Hog's face.
And this is a good place.
Which is supposed to be his favorite, apparently. Please tell us about this dish. It sounds incredible.
Great place to stop as well, because today's recipe...
Oh, here we go. I've been waiting for this.
I've done a take on soused hog's face, which is soused hog's face.
I like the way you say that, man.
Yeah, so soused hog's face is you have to understand and see, if they get a pig, they're using every part of that pig. So, the collagen from the pig could have been used for gelatin to make the Galapagos Islands. The head of the pig... A lot of great food in the head of the pig, right?
I've heard that.
You've got the cheeks, the snout. A lot of the food in the pig, in the face of the pig, is some of the tenderest of cuts, but it's not very high end, a very working class. The good cuts like the loin and the chops and all that stuff, that's going to the high class people. But on a boat, they've probably already eaten that food. That's great. But the face... they're going to eat that too. And so what they would do, my recipe is an adaptation, because I'm not going to tell people to go cook a whole pig's head. That's crazy. And probably
if you do, please put it on social media and send it to us.
Know.
I would love to see these pigs' faces cooked, by the way. Sorry, Victor.
No, let us know if you have, or if you ever do, or if you eat this, because it looks pretty cool. But basically, they take a pig's head, they cook it in vinegar and white wine for it's a braised dish for a very long period of time, and they often leave it for a long period of time. to kind of let it tenderize and let the flavors kind of get out there. Probably not the safest dish to eat at sea, but they do. And so what we'll check in the caption below. I've done it with pork cheeks, braised pork cheeks in a red wine sauce, not a white wine sauce. Similar to the stew we did a couple episodes back, but this is just a little bit different and a nice kind of braised dish. We're coming into fall, so you might see a lot of braised dishes coming to my end because I like these warm, tender dishes around this time of year. So feel free to check that out. Give that a try. Let us know. I'll be trying it again if I can find pork cheek, at my local butcher. But yeah, great dish. So our take, our podcast take on soused hog's face. We're
talking soused hog's face. I guarantee you, no one who is listening to this has ever tried soused hog's face. I think it's a shame. I think you should give this recipe a try, folks.
Unless we have someone from the late 1800s UK around, I doubt people will have had it. But I did find many recipes for it online. Wow.
Okay. I can't say I can make that myself currently, but I will put it in the list of things to make because I do want to try that.
Yeah.
Minute 111 continuous. Maturin is sulking. He doesn't want to eat with the officers. Not a big problem with the officers. They're having a great time without him. By the way, great lesson for the folks at home. If you sulk and avoid going to a party, they will still have a good time without you. All right? Sulking is not helping anyone. So try to avoid that.
It's not helping you.
No, people don't care. They'll just keep having a good time. It's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, Maturin is sulking. They're toasting upstairs, having a great time. Maturin's upset because they caught the whalers. They found the whalers, and that caused Jack to know where the Acheron is and start chasing it again because that's their mission. Their mission is not to go to the Galápagos Islands and collect insects. It's to fight the Acheron. So Maturin's upset. And it's just a nice scene to show that kind of they're falling out. Their bromance is in a little separation time.
Yeah, this is the part. If this was a rom-com, this would be the part where one of them is mad at the other one for something fairly petty, and you know that they're going to resolve it later on. Moving on, minute 113, crew is eating lobscouse stew.
Yeah, so that's an assumption. I don't know if that's what they're eating, but it looked like lobscouse.
Okay.
A scouse stew, what they call it. And yeah.
They look like they're having a good time, so shout out to lobscouse stew or whatever else they're eating.
And this scene is important germane to the plot because the old fellow who Maturin has subsequently operated on his head, and he's okay there, holdfast guy. He brings up the story of the Jonah, which is furthering Hollum's little side story here. They're calling him the Jonah. When Morley died, he was on watch. It was his crew running those sails. When the Acheron first showed up, Hollum was there. He showed indecisiveness. And down the line, they're blaming all the problems. The one guy didn't.
They're scapegoating this guy in a big way.
Yeah, the one guy didn't salute. Yeah. I don't know if that's happened yet, where we are in the story, but
it's about to happen.
Oh, okay. So we'll get there.
That is a bad sign, by the way. If you're in a situation, if you're in a school or a sports team or even in a job, and you suddenly realize that they've given you an insulting nickname, you have to get out of that situation immediately. You can't recover from that. It's game over. Yeah.
And Jonah and the Whale is a kind of a seafaring story.
Yeah.
Crewmen are very superstitious. Very superstitious. The Jonah is, God punished Jonah for questioning God or something like that, and Jonah had to go. He was in a whale at one point. I'm not religious, nor am I Christian, so I don't know the full story. But basically, God punishes Jonah, and so they believe God is punishing Hollum.
They're hanging out with Jonah, and they think that God is punishing them because of that, and they don't like it.
And Jonah's going to bring them all down to the hot place, as the old guy says.
Yeah. Classic scapegoating at sea.
Yeah, which is also, once again, just to bring it back to the main theme, a society here. Often when things go awry, when things are going wrong, people get scapegoated, be it a minority group, be it immigrants or something like that.
You got to blame somebody. With
you got to scapegoat. It's a very common thing in society, and we see it happening right here on. Well, it's easy to pick on the weak, right?
Yeah. And the crew member who is having a very difficult time with the PTSD after cutting his friend loose is drinking on the job. They think that this drinking contributes to him not saluting Hullum.
Yeah, and he shoves him.
And he shoves him. Very disrespectful. Very like junior high bully type maneuver, shoving him into a locker basically. And this results in a contentious decision by the captain to actually flog the man who showed disrespect to Hullum. Possibly because he was drunk at the time, which is explained to him by the doctor. They have a little bit of a debate about it, but in the end they decide, no, we got to flog this guy, which turned out to be the wrong decision because it made it even worse for Hullum, because Hullum feels like, oh, now I'm a snitch. They hate me even more now.
However, oh, sorry.
No, you go ahead.
However, once again, back to that theme, in the service, one always chooses the lesser of two evils. So flogging Hullum is evil, flogging the gentleman is evil, but more evil would be not flogging him and potentially being seen as weak as a leader, and also potentially having a mutiny on your hands, which could lead to a lot more deaths.
Very tricky situation for the captain. Yeah.
And Maturin says, tip the grog over the side, which he's like, I'm not doing that.
Right.
Because as we know, alcohol is used as a reward. It helps keep people in line. It's a right on these boats.
So this alcohol is basically the bread and circus that kind of pacifies the lower classes of the crew. If you get rid of that, they'll start thinking about where they're at, and things will start going on in their minds and look at ideas. So we got to keep these guys drunk.
And these guys have rights, right? And alcohol is one of their rights. And so it's funny that Maturin's saying take away their rights, because he's all about, anarchy and stuff like that. So it's funny that he doesn't understand the service so well. So he thinks, okay, well, don't let them get drunk, because when they get drunk, they do bad things.
He does some really basic math, which is this guy who disrespected Hullum was drunk when he did it. Let's get rid of the booze, because otherwise other people will start getting drunk and doing things like that.
Yeah.
Captain's not buying that math, and I don't think he should have.
Important scene.
So next scene, more tea or coffee, as you mentioned here. During that scene when they were discussing it. And in this 120, very important scene, Blakeney shares a drink with Hullum.
Right. And so this is when you see the midshipmen's mess, the midshipmen's mess, where that's where they all hang out. So you rarely see the higher up officers there, the lieutenants, et cetera, et cetera. This is their area of the boat. And so Hullum can go there and hide, because even the crew wouldn't.
And he does look like he's hiding.
He's losing his mind. And Calamy, who's kind of a hard ass, he calls him out. He says he's just, shirking his responsibility.
Calamy also a bit of a douche. He seems like that, what Reddit would call a Chad.
A bit of a
good-looking dude. Yeah, good-looking dude, tall, probably comes from a rich family. He gets the job done. He is very strong, but
well respected.
Yeah, I think because he's good-looking and tall, and Hullum's not. Hullum's ugly and kind of shirky. And
he has authority. Like, you see him having authority over people. Yeah. And he's kind of, we see it later. He's the heir apparent. He's, there's Aubrey, there's Pullings, and then there are the midshipmen. And he's going to be he's going to be a lieutenant.
Yeah.
He's next to be a lieutenant. He's next in line. Him and Hullum. Hullum's older than Calamy. Hullum should be next in line, but he's not as good. So that's just an interesting point there.
Yeah. And that leads to Hullum, I guess,
he can't take
his own life. He just can't take it. There's literally no escape from the ship. You're stuck there. You can't walk away. This isn't like, you just got transferred to a job or a school in some place you didn't like. You can just walk. You can't walk away.
No.
So he decides, I guess enough is enough. He grabs a cannonball, jumps off the ship, and it seems like that actually does work in pacifying the crew, and everything seems to get back on track at that point.
Yeah, it's funny because he says to Blakeney before he does it, he goes, Captain says we should be getting a wind tomorrow.
Yeah.
Or Blakeney says it to him, and he says, "Oh, I don't doubt that." And then,
Yeah.
for the whole time in this show, he's been seen as weak. But I would say jumping off a boat with holding a cannonball
After saying that little line
in the middle of the
badass.
ocean is a badass way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like
And kudos to the writers for not overdoing his lines. That was just real subtle, real badass.
Yeah, badass.
One of the
way
cooler
of doing it.
suicides I've seen in a movie for sure.
Yeah, but very sad scene. Very sad.
Very
scene.
sad. Very sad.
And it's interesting that you didn't see any fallout from it. You saw Blakeney being like, and then cut to the funeral.
Yep. Tough one, but these were hard men, and these things happen. Yeah.
And then, interestingly enough, as soon as they kind of put the issue to bed, the wind starts, the rain starts, everything's going nuts, and we cut to the segues into what I put in my notes is Killick recreating the water scene from Flashdance. The men are collecting the rainwater because they're probably low on water.
Mm-hmm.
So they want to drink stuff. They want to get refreshed. I don't know if the rainwater is salty or what. I have no idea, but at least they're washing themselves because they've just been sitting in a heat wave in the doldrums, right? There's a point in the ocean, like between the tropics, where it's hot and there's very little wind. And you just kind of drift through it, and it's apparently was excruciating for these sailors to pass through these parts, and they would avoid it by catching the trade winds east and west and trying to go around it. But they got stuck in it, and basically just
cooked themselves.
As soon as that rain hit, you see, I said Killick doing flash dance. He's just going big sexy with it.
God, I'll tell you what though, this movie, and I imagine these books must have been. Sorry about that. I mean, these books, they must have been just amazing escapes for young men who were just wanted adventure. Just to think about what it would be like to be on a vessel like this. Because it does seem like it's all romance and action and adventure and everything. But then you realize, wait a second, where am I going to take a shower? Where am I going to poop? What am I going to eat? There's a lot of things, technicalities you don't think of. You're like, maybe it wouldn't be that cool to do this.
You can imagine what that... I mean, I guess you probably go nose deaf to it at some point. But you can totally imagine what's going on smell-wise. You got livestock.
Below decks, the smell must be very interesting.
Yeah, livestock, gunpowder.
Yeah. I actually like the smell of gunpowder.
Oh, I do too.
Yeah.
In the morning.
Yes, along with napalm. Yeah. Okay, we cut to. I'll tell you what. Along with the Galapagos Islands puddings, what happens at 1:33 is where the crew are slicing up the cacti to brew some kind of alcoholic beverage.
Mezcal or tequila.
Mezcal. It looked so freaking good. The ASMR sound of the chopping of the cactus and then putting it in the still, and the guy drinking it refreshingly. That could have been a commercial for me. That made me want to drink whatever that man was drinking.
Galapagos mezcal, yeah.
Yeah.
And the two older guys, it's him and his buddy. They're kind of, it looks like he's a bit of a, like they're both the experienced guys. Everyone's playing cricket. These guys are like, no. I know what we
get down to business here, guys.
We gotta replenish because we're probably running out of grog. Let's get some more booze, and they don't care what it is. Like I said, right? They probably got the rum in the Caribbean, and now they're probably out of rum or running out of rum, and it's like, all right, well, we got to get something. Let's get some of this tequila, and whatever it takes, right? So they make it. They probably store it. They probably ration it, and they share it out with the crew.
Well, it's great that they actually have the still available. They brought that with them specifically because if they do run out of rum or alcohol, they can always jump on land and find something with sugar in it and distill that down.
Or these two wily veterans made it out of things on the boat. Who knows, right?
Who knows? Well, they know what they're doing. Though. This is not their first rodeo.
Yeah, I love that guy. He's just like, oh, that's good. Like he's just so happy about it. He's so pleased. That old guy is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah, man. Yeah. Minute 148, hour 1. We're just going to call it 148.
Sure, 148.
Pre-battle tea. Maturin and Captain Jack and Killick and the rest of the crew.
Yeah, they're up on deck. So they've now they've seen, Maturin has seen the Acheron when he was doing his little, he's been shot by the Marine, the captain of the Marines. he was shot by him.
Oh, by the way, that scene where Maturin gets shot, phenomenally designed scene.
Yeah, really well.
I just want to
scene.
shout this out for a second. Sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, but Francis Coppola does this with The Godfather too. It's like when there's violence like that, he likes to have it be a little bit strange at first to throw you off before the violence occurs.
Yeah.
So similar to like The Godfather Part 2, where the guy kind of taps the light bulb, and then we see De Niro shoot him. There's a little bit of a I don't know what it is. It's almost like a magic trick. I'm gonna just make you look over here, and then all of a sudden, pow! Here's the violence. So
it makes it more shocking.
Yeah, the crew member is tracking an albatross, I believe, across the deck with a long rifle.
Yeah.
And he's taking a couple shots, doesn't see it, and he's like tracking it, and all of a sudden, the bird swoops. He shoots, hits the doctor Maturin in the kidneys or somewhere in the
fatty
body.
part of the side. Yeah.
But the design of the scene I really liked with the albatross. That looked like a real albatross. I don't think it was CGI.
No, I have no idea, but it did look real.
It looked real, and yeah,
it was a great scene, and also led to. I mean, I think if we cut to now, we're talking about them having their pre-battle coffee or tea, and the one guy, Killick, goes, "Oh, there's 2 lumps in there for you." We have to think
that's a great accent, by the way.
I've been working on it. I watched the movie a lot.
I should acknowledge it, yeah.
But think about what they've seen this man do. They've seen him fix the old guy who had a skull fracture
with a coin.
With a coin.
Yeah.
So they saw him do that. They've seen him operate on himself.
Badass.
Which is so badass. Like that scene, he's like, I'm going to lift up my rib. All right, I can't see. Put the mirror down. And like, that's just, he's, he looks weak. You said it earlier on. He doesn't look like but he's a badass guy. And so everyone really respects him because 1, he saves people's lives. He saved that old guy's life. And 2, he's like, he's got some fortitude. Like he's no joke. So, I don't think you could really afford, unless you were an upper class rich person. I think you had to be a badass just to survive in those times. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. And so 2 lumps in there, which is just a nice little nod to show that he's got a lot of respect with the crew. And then
I just want to interrupt. That is a great small way of showing respect to somebody. That's a great manly way to do it. Instead of saying, I really appreciate what you did. I think you're a good guy. So there you go. 2 lumps. Nice job. Boom. Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah.
And Killick rations. He's serious about what goes on in his kitchen, right? So he's not giving extra sugar to any, Tom, Dick, and Harry. He's not giving it to Alan, Sailing Master Alan. That guy's not getting it for sure.
Oh no. Not unless you save someone's life or just cut your own leg off, dude. Like, give me a reason.
Yeah. So we go into battle.
Yeah, so we go into battle. Amazing nautical battle scene. Probably the best ever, I would say, nautical battle scene in motion picture history. Do you agree or not? I disagree with that.
Up there. Yeah, up there.
It's up there.
Off the top of my head, I'm trying to think of other ones that I like, and nothing's coming to mind. A couple of good ones in Cutthroat Island.
Cutthroat Island. Yeah.
Gina Davis
underrated.
pirate movie.
Yeah.
Not some would say not a great film, but a couple good naval battles in that. But this is like hyper realistic, and they're playing games with each other the whole time, right? Like he comes in as the whaler, and then they ambush.
Great cat and mouse. Great cat and mouse. Yeah.
They ambush them. Alan proven wrong for the final time. Says, I think the job's done. No, it's not. He takes a bullet directly to the dome, which that guy must have had fantastic aim because those guns do not shoot true at all. Like it's just a
right in the
ball of
center
a
of his head.
musket, and he just gets done.
Yeah.
And so his final proven wrong proves fatal. Blake,
that guy can't catch a break, man.
Never, no.
Jeez.
Blakeney, the hero, comes charging in over the cannons. Pulling's climbing across the wreckage. He's a total badass. They hit the mast down, which is huge. And then what they do is earlier on, they said, "Oh, we're outclassed, we're outgunned." And Russell Crowe says, we're all weak at the stern. No matter how modern your ship is, you're weak at the stern. Because if you shoot out the stern, first of all, that's where all those nice windows are. That's where the captain's cabin is. That's where the steering is. So if the steering doesn't answer on a boat, you're screwed.
Yeah.
You need a stroke of luck. Like earlier in the film, their stern got raked and they had to like row into fog to avoid the Acheron.
Which I didn't know they could do that. I didn't know you could actually get out a bunch of boats and pull your ship like that.
Do with anything you do, anything you can do, right?
Yeah.
Right?
But they were actually able to outrun the Acheron by doing that just for a short period of time. I was really struck by that as a maneuver. I didn't know that was possible.
Yeah, well, naval battles are slow, right? You see the ship far off, and you're not catching up with that guy for like 2 days.
Yeah, it
Right?
takes a long. You have a long time to prepare.
You could have a couple like classes and stuff going for navigation. Yeah. It's all good. We'll catch up. We'll get there.
And you might outrun the guy. You know, he might give up. You don't know.
No, you never know. Yeah. So they shoot the main mast out, which slows the ship right down. Then they come around. They do some sort of maneuver to come around and give it the broadside to the other side of the boat, which rakes the stern, making it totally useless. And then they climb across the wreckage from the sail, and they're still shooting at each other. But the surprise cannons are not strong enough to do much, and the Acheron cabins could sink. And that's why Blakeney does that. They're going to sink us, and he runs across. Right, and then he starts fighting. Those little boys just stabbing grown men. It's bedlam down there.
Yeah, real missed opportunity with Blakeney, the kid who got his arm cut off, to not put a hook on him where his arm was.
Just like, start hooking people.
Well, I mean, it's just a cliche from pirate times. You know, the pirate with the hook for a hand. You know what I mean? Blakeney lost his arm. Yeah, throw a hook on that kid.
Well, there's a peg leg guy. You see him earlier.
Yeah.
Shoving rope into a fire, like with his peg leg, which I feel like that's pretty useful if you're managing fires. A good peg leg could help.
So. Yeah. There's a lot of things you can do with a peg leg besides just use it as a peg leg. Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, missed opportunity for Blakeney not to have a hook for his arm. Great nautical action scene, boarding, everything historic. I've been thinking about this lately and how movies have just become just these churned out CGI dog crap type. The level is strangely high and low, but the problem is, like, at a certain point, there's going to be so many movies out that you really need to create a differentiator, some kind of advantage for yourself, for your movie to stand out. And I think that historical accuracy, which is what Robert Eggers is doing with his movies, he follows a bit of a manifesto that he has rules in his movies where the utmost top thing is historical accuracy. And I think that is an advantage when you're making movies as to what the audience would pay to see. I mean, I would rather go see a movie like this, which I know is historically accurate. I know there's very little CGI in it. And I think that creates a better experience, although probably more expensive. But I think we might be going that way soon, because I think we've reached peak CGI at this point. So
yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Like Pirates of the Caribbean, for instance, much more elaborate action. And you know what I mean? But I prefer this just because I know this is more real. Right.
Yeah, and it was good. It was, he used a lot of like long sequence shots, a lot of really interesting panning shots, single takes of a lot of action, so that you really got kind of the story of the battle. Like the battle in and of itself was like a vignette, was its own kind of tale. So I thought that was interesting. I thought it was an amazingly done scene, and even right up into the end when the whalers get freed. And they're rushing up, and then all of a sudden it all kind of comes to a crashing halt, right? They strike their colors, which means they've taken their flag down, they've surrendered.
How masquerading is that, by the way?
Oh, that's gotta be the worst. Gotta be the worst. You never want to be that guy.
That's like losing a football game and then they just take your jersey off of you. You know,
just rip it off. Yeah. And so he tries to find the captain. Apparently, the captain's dead.
He's informed by the ship's surgeon that the captain has died, and he shows him the captain's body on the
yeah. So
We don't. Do we want to? Is it we're doing spoilers. The whole thing's been spoiled.
Yeah, at any point. So we know that we learn later on that this is a ruse, and that any of the prisoners are crewmen. So when you take the orders were with regards to the Acheron, burn her, sink her, or take her a prize. So they opted for the third, which is obviously the best, because if you take a ship a prize,
also the hardest to do, by the way.
Oh yeah. But definitely one of the only ones they could do, really, because they were totally outgunned. So they couldn't go toe to toe with this ship. They had to, burning her is also tough because you have to go on the boat and ignite the powder magazine, and that'll blow it up. But so they took her a prize, and when you take a ship a prize, you have to sail it to the nearest port. You put the crew in as prisoners, and you sell the ship and its contents, and then that becomes part of the crew's take for the surprise. Now, any of the crewmen that are able to sail and not injured from the Acheron will be forced to sail. They're not locked up usually. They're forced to sail. And the Acheron's captain knows this, and knows that if he's perceived as the ship's doctor, he won't be locked up, and they can stage a mutiny. They could take the ship back. So that's
just the finessing of this French captain is just a thing of marvel. Just incredible.
Mental chess between these two guys, right?
The cat and mouse game continues, not just with the ships, but with them personally.
Yeah. Well, and you see it when Russell Crowe goes to the back of the ship to find the captain, and the guy tries to stab him and whatnot, and he throws a perfectly good knife out the window. He could have just kept that.
That was a bad move on his part.
Yeah, it's that's a free knife. He sees the captain has a French horn and there's music, so it's there's parallels between us, right? We're not all that different. It's very interesting.
Yeah, they do seem like very similar characters. They would probably be great friends if they got to know each other, I would say.
They're very wily.
Yeah. Another bromance for Captain Jack, by the way.
Yeah, Captain Jack and the Acheron's guy. And we see this before Maturin says, at one point, he's like, what did I do to this guy? Why is he coming after me so hard? And Maturin's like, he fights like you, man. So. Yeah, it's just great. It's great tacticians. I would have loved if they had made this into a series similar to James Bond. Man, that would have been incredible. That was the plan. That was the plan. I mean, O'Ryan wrote these books well into, I think, up until the 80s. Yeah. I've read most of them. I don't think I made it to the end. But there's 20 of them. There's a whole bunch of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So last food scenes. Let's just wrap up the food scenes again with the baked cheese on the toast. My favorite looking food pornography part of the movie. I'm glad it's at the end again because
we see it in the beginning.
I'll take more of those. Yeah.
We see it at the end. Mm-hmm. We've just gone through this entire.
Oh, those scenes were probably shot on the same day.
Yeah. It's almost the same scene.
Exactly.
But we've just gone through this ordeal, chasing a ship from Atlantic, shooting the Cape, rescuing the whalers, the doctor getting shot, blah, blah, blah.
Stop on the Galápagos Islands, look at some turtles,
Dude kills himself. We lose a bunch of guys in a fighting the, blah, blah, blah. And then now back to normal, scrape, never a tune you can dance to. He hates the music. He's cooking cheese on toast again. A nice little kind of bookend. And it's a film that's bookended by food, kind of.
It really is. I think we've pretty much just exhausted all the food content of this movie. Loved every minute of it personally. Loved
amazing.
Yeah.
Any key takeaways from you?
Key takeaways is that I really do think this is one of the last films of its kind. It's one of the last kind of analog, non-CGI based, hyper-historical adventure film for a grown-up.
Yeah.
Has there been other ones since then? You tell me. I don't think there has. It's been 20 years, basically.
That World War I movie. What was it with Again, another
1940.
yeah, that 1948 or whatever it was.
1948.
Or
Yeah.
42 or whatever, I forget. It goes to show my level of history.
Yeah.
But it
The
also
Sam
had,
Mendes, we're supposed to be all, it's supposed to look like one
yeah,
completion.
one
Oh, and then Chris Nolan also, I guess, Dunkirk.
Dunkirk was
Dunkirk
very
is-
similar.
Yeah, Dunkirk is similar to this. Okay, so
Hyper,
very
hyper
rare though.
real.
Very rare though.
Yeah, and especially from this time period too, like the Napoleonic Wars and the
They call him
Nelson,
Boney. They call him
Boney. Yeah. So
you don't want to be bowing down to Boney, do you, man?
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah,
Very
so
interesting.
those are my final thoughts, in that I really am going to miss. I mean, we see the writing on the wall. They're not going to make these films anymore. Once Nolan is done, once a couple guys are done, it's kind of over, I think, for this kind of analog practical effects filmmaking, which is a damn shout out to practical effects filmmaking in epic form.
I mean, things are cyclical. I guess it's there's that great debate. It's like, do I use CGI? Do I use practical effects? I mean,
Well, Jared, we're grown. We've
Yeah.
worked. We know.
Yeah.
What does it always come down to? What's cheaper to do?
yeah, cheaper
That's
and
what
easier.
everything comes down to.
But then the craft of it, right? Like we just saw Top Gun. I just saw that Top Gun movie, and they shoot a lot of those flying scenes in airplane. And
But
boy,
you can still see the CGI when there is
Yeah.
CGI. You
When-
know it's.
when
You can see it. Your eye knows it. Your eye knows it.
but you can tell there's a visceral feeling, a vast difference between these jackwagons sitting in a fake cockpit in a simulator versus actually being up there and you see it on their faces. It's intense.
Well, here's
Right?
the thing. That's what everyone is talking about with this Top Gun, is how they're doing those real cameras in the car, and people love that. And it was a
Yeah.
real kind of selling point. But they
Yeah.
still use CGI.
They used a lot of CGI.
explosions and, so it's
Some-
a real
Something to be said about actually getting on a ship and doing these scenes, which they
Yes,
did.
especially because they say in Hollywood, never work on water. That's one of the rules. Don't work with dogs. Don't work with kids. Don't work on water.
Yeah.
The pain in the buttness of making a seagoing movie, which takes place exclusively on a ship like this, to do it practically is a real nightmare as far as production goes. It's really tough to do without any CGI. So,
Yeah.
shout out to these guys for getting this done. Shout out to Peter Weir for
Love it.
making a movie once every 7 years or whatever
Yeah.
that guy does.
Well, he made Dead Poet Society and a few others, but
Yeah, he started off kind of hot, but then towards the end, this was the last movie, I believe. No, there was one more after this, The Long
Yeah.
Walk Home, which is a bit of a letdown, I must say.
Never saw
for
it.
to be his last movie, because he is an OG goat, Peter Weir.
yeah, this movie was a masterpiece in my opinion, and one of my all-time favorite films. It's definitely in my top 5 of pantheon of films. It's right up my alley.
Mhm.
I love to really.
By the way, I am so glad that I have you on this podcast, who has read the books and has can speak intelligently about it, because I learned a lot, frankly, from what you said. So shout out to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, man, and thank you
Yeah.
for hosting. And we'll be back at it next week, right? With 4 Rooms.
4 Rooms. If you haven't seen 4 Rooms, if you're a fan of Tarantino, this is the hidden gem.
Yeah.
from,
Tarantino,
back
a few
in the
other
90s.
directors, Rod Rodriguez,
Yep.
and some others. Yeah,
Yeah,
very
so
excited.
4 Rooms was a culmination of 4 very hot directors from the indie scene of the 90s, as Jerry mentioned, Robert Rodriguez, Quentin Tarantino. They're the only ones we can recall, because the other 2 kind of fell off. So it just
Yeah.
kind of gives you an idea of how things happen in life, and I guess in the careers. But by the way, 4 Rooms, one of the great hidden classics. We're gonna review that next week, along with all the food in it. My name is Paul. He's Jeremy, and we'll see you guys next week.
Adios.